What is crack lacking, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Valley coming at you with a solo podcast. Going to go through my most improved player from every NBA team today. Not something I wrote about, but something I was thinking about. So I decided to watch a bunch of film and highlight maybe something or a few things about each player that I think they've improved upon most. And we'll go through every team in the league. We'll try and make this a little snappy since it's a solo pod. We'll see how I do with pacing myself. Very quickly, if you haven't already, if this is your first time on YouTube or checking us out on audio, subscribe, hit the sub button, like, comment, help the algorithm love us back. Let me know who your most improved player is for every NBA team. You can put your 30-team list in the comments if you want to, or just let me know who you might disagree with. If you're listening to this on audio, I'm going to try, or if you're watching this on YouTube, bear with me as I'm production crew of one at the moment. So we'll throw something up on screen so you can see who and what I'm selecting for each team. Grant and I will be back later this week with a couple more extensive episodes. We've been putting some out on the weekends because that's worked better for mostly my schedule, but probably his as well. So without further ado, let's start talking about the most improved player on every NBA team as chosen by moi. So we'll start with the Atlanta Hawks. I have Jalen Johnson, which, I'm not going to lie, as a brief aside, he might be my most improved player pick in general if it wasn't now for the game's minimum that he's going to miss after his latest injury. He's just been super great, revelatory for the Hawks in a lot of ways. Really love the live feet passing that we see from him. There's the defensive playmaking element. I think the standstill shooting has improved a lot this year, and he's shown some nice offensive counters when you get in the lane, including some turnaround jumpers. And so this is someone who I think is just, it's part of a bigger role, but he's also just improved in so many different areas. I am curious, though, and we've only seen it for a couple hundred possessions this year, if Atlanta might try a little bit more of him at center moving forward. That might just depend on the future of either Clint Capella and or Onyeka Okongwu and who they go with long term. On to the Boston Celtics. This one was tough. I'm going to settle on the reveal is Mr. Look, before I even reveal it, I think you could have gone, if you want to talk about White, if you want to talk about Jason Tatum, if you want to talk about Kristaps Porzingis, even as someone who, he proved that he could balance where he wants to get his and punish mismatches and still hit kind of those turnarounds, but also just fit into the larger context of a team while still being incredibly valuable defensively. I think you could probably make a case for him. I ended up going with Jaylen Brown, just the stuff that he has done defensively this year. And when you look at, okay, his 3-point percentage is lower than you want it to be, but the level of difficulty on these looks feels like it's gone up. And when he's doing that and being, when you've seen the 3-point percentage slump a little bit, but he's still able to score at all these different levels and has fully unlocked his offensive counters, even if you want him to pass a little bit more. And then just the degree to which he's been busting his ass on the defensive end. I think it goes to him, but this is really unless you're going to select someone who's working from a super low baseline, and even they're light on candidates for that. I think Jaylen Brown is the way to go here, but that was one of my more difficult ones, not going to lie. One of the more easier ones is the Brooklyn Nets. That was Cam Thomas. I think there's like this tendency to bill him as mostly just a microwave 6-man of the year scorer who won't pass. Maybe he winds up being sort of that microwave guy. I think he's incrementally improved his passing. The 3-point volume is up this year. And he's just sort of, I know the Nets, people don't like them or find them compelling, and for deserved reason at this point. He's quietly carrying a monster load, has a usage rate over 30 for them. That's just, like I said, that's monstrous. And if you kind of look, so here's every player to post a 30 plus usage rate with a sub 10 turnover rate before their age 23 season. T-Mac did it twice. Shaq did it once. Porzingis did it once. And now Cam Thomas is doing it. He's middle of the pack when you're looking at the assist percentage here. I think he's a little bit over 15 right now. I think he's made incremental improvements enough to look at him and say, if you're the Nets, oh, what do we do? Is he part of the core moving forward? And he is extension eligible this summer. But I think this isn't just someone who, yes, he's seen his role expand, but I do think that we've seen some changes and adaptations to his offensive games. And you can't deny that statistical company right now. I mean, can he level up as a passer? Can he level up as a defender? Those are fair debates to be had, but you can't argue with the numbers right now. And his efficiency, yeah, it could be higher, but it hasn't fallen off a cliff despite what is an incredibly heavy usage from him. Charlotte, another really tough team. I'm going to go with Cody Martin. He has not played in a ton of games, but this is a team that doesn't have a ton of really good candidates, in my opinion. Like you haven't seen enough. LaMelo Ball hasn't played enough. You haven't seen enough from Mark Williams this year. Brandon Miller's a rookie, and he's kind of, there's been aspects of his game that have impressed me more than most, but he's kind of, not hitting a rookie wall, but it's later in the season, doesn't look as well on the offensive end from him. You look at Cody Martin dealing with another ankle injury, and so he has not played a lot, and he has a sub 47 true shooting percentage, but he covers super difficult assignments on the defensive end, really good help rotations, contests, closeouts, pretty crafty with his passing in traffic this year, even if he picks up his dribble too soon. It doesn't feel like he's maybe as quick as he was, 2 years ago, but kind of finding his niche within that game. I've been impressed with the moments that I've seen from him, where we always kind of knew he was this gap filler. And maybe this is a case of me just so much distances between him and his last healthy season. I forgot how many gaps he fills, but you watch him and you can kind of just feel and see his impact all over the place, which is just a big deal. And I do think he has leveled it up. If I had to pick the areas, I really looking at what he can kind of do as a passer when he's in traffic, and then also just the scale at which or the level of assignments that he's defending right now. On to the Chicago Bulls. Shout out to Ayo Dosunmu here, who I would really like to pick, but it has to be Kobe White. He might be the favorite to win Most Improved Player as we're recording this, even though Alperen Sengun is still eligible. Doesn't look like Scotty Barnes is going to maintain his eligibility. So, and look, he would deserve it. His offensive toggling this year has been great. He seems stronger, more composed in the lane, definitely comfortable working on the ball, but he also leads the NBA in spot up possessions per game. And when you have that coupled with someone who is hitting his pull up threes at a super high clip, here's everyone shooting above 40% on off the dribble threes and minimum taking 100 of them this season. Luka, Harden, Duncan Robinson, Jamal Murray, Mike Conley, Drew Holiday, CJ McCollum, and Kobe White. That's pretty good company to be in. And so to be able to just sort of toggle between those two existences for the Bulls, that's no small shakes. And we caught shit on the podcast by wondering if the Bulls had found maybe their backcourt of the future in Ayo Dosunmu and Kobe White. I don't think that'll be what they settle on, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. That's how good those two guys have been this season. I think for Kobe White, there's definitely a better patience and process to what he's doing as a playmaker. That's still something to kind of monitor moving forward. Do you ascribe the turnover issues out of the pick and roll more so to the Chicago Bulls as personnel or spacing, or is that just something he still needs to learn the ropes for? But if you're a Bulls fan, you latch on to what he's done this season, because that is probably the brightest spot of the year, if not what you've seen from Ayo Dosunmu. On to the Cleveland Cavaliers. This was tough. Let me read my candidates for them first, because I had a bunch of them penciled in. There was Isaac Okoro, Max Strus, I think even Sam Merrill. Those were the three that I kind of really looked at. You could have, at points this year, made a case for Jared Allen, but the thing with Sam Merrill, because he has played a real role, it's just he was working from such a low baseline. I didn't know what to do with that, and so I ultimately ended up settling on Isaac Okoro. I think this is just a more complete player who shouldn't be as big of a liability in the playoffs. We know he's hitting his threes now. We know those threes aren't at a great degree of difficulty, but to hit them is a big deal. He does, when you watch him, though, feel like he's quicker at pumping into drives. He's thrown some really nice passes up the floor and also out of those drives. He knows how to get behind defenses, not only in transition, but in the half court. And I feel like he's ratcheted up just everything about his offense that we already maybe would have liked, the secondary ball movement, but it's all just sort of increased and coalesced better this year. That's on top of what he does defensively. He probably won't make an all defense team. And I don't even know if we gave him honorable mentions when we went through ours at the 3-quarter poll. But he certainly at least deserves the honorable mention. He covers some of the toughest assignments. His minutes are not as high as some of the other guys, and you would like him to be able to scale up a little bit in what he's guarding, but he's just a super disruptive defender, and he's been super valuable to the Cavs this year. Very interested. He's another guy. I'm just very interested what his next contract is going to look like, to see not only how the Cavs value him, but maybe if he's going to end up hitting restricted free agency, how the rest of the league might value him too. The Dallas Mavericks, I don't think this is much of a choice. Dante Exum here. It's been really cool. Just 2 years away from the league, and he deals with injuries all before that. Comes back stronger, thicker, no longer a shooting liability. He's taking under 2 attempts per game, so I don't think he's some marksman. We'll see how it holds up in in the playoffs, but also the fact that he's just able to work off the ball in general. It's not just as a shooter, but it's someone who will move. He's averaging 1.8 points per possession as the cutter. That's just not something that we've really I remember seeing from him previously in his career, maybe in like different iterations of the earlier Utah days. And so they're not going to utilize him in that capacity that much when you look at Dallas's offense. I would also like to see him maybe get out and transition a little more. Again, that's not going to be Dallas's style unless you're dealing with very specific lineups. I am very impressed, though, also with how he's still been able to defend the smaller, quicker, twitchier bodies, despite it feels like having this extra, whether you want to call it girth or just size in general. And this is someone who, when you're kind of looking to fill out Mavericks lineups, could he be a part of some of their most important units come the postseason? Absolutely. And he deserves just a ton of credit for not just making it back to the NBA, but establishing himself as a good player on a team that has immediate aspirations. The Denver Nuggets were another team where this was super tough. I think I think people will view this as super easy. Maybe it's clearly Peyton Watson, the human adrenaline shot. Or look at what Christian Brown is doing right now. He might be having his best stretch as a Nugget. Is it one of them? I'm still, and I don't KCP, shout out to him, but he's just doing kind of all the stuff he's always done. He's had a fantastic season. Maybe you could go with Aaron Gordon. It does feel like he has leveled up his defense again, and he's able to really hang in some of those small ball units that they run out. I went with I ultimately settled on Michael Porter Jr. I think this is just way more of a complete player than we've ever seen. When you look at the defensive rebounding, it's more consistent. The defensive effort as a helper continues to catch my eye. And to have all that while you're able to be this super scalable plug and play guy on the offensive end, even though per your skill set, per your size, per your background, you're supposed to be so much more than that. I think he's just done an excellent job more than ever this season of fitting into the bigger picture while also making sure he leaves his mark on a more regular game by game basis, where it just felt like even last year, a good portion of the time, not so much in the playoffs, but if he wasn't scoring or if a shot wasn't falling, it seemed like you didn't really feel him. And that is just no longer the case this year. And so I'm going to give him the nod just because I think it was harder than what he did when you're looking at Peyton Watson, who was coming off such a small sample size from last year. The Detroit Pistons, we have to say nice things about the Pistons for a second here. How about that? It's Cade Cunningham. I mean, he's going through a little bit of an efficiency trough right now. I get it. Didn't start off the year too hot either, but he really cleaned up a lot of the decision-making and turnover issues, despite never really playing within a better spacing environment. Deserves all the credit in the world for that. The three-pointer, not so much right now, but it has come around, and we're not just talking about off the catch. Like, we're talking about dribbling into pull-ups. He's able to hit some step backs. The work he's able to do in the lane. This is someone who, if you had any doubt that he could be no worse than the second best player on a really good team, I think he's answered those questions this year for the most part in the affirmative. I want to see him so badly just around better spacing and maybe on a more coherent team with a better plan in general. I think if you're a Pistons fan, though, there's not too many bright spots to latch onto. I think you could argue that guys like Jalen Duren, maybe even Jaden Ivey, have regressed this year, but the Simone Fontecchio story, and then just what Cade Cunningham and Asar Thompson before his blood clot issues, just looking at them and seeing those two players specifically, okay, we do have two core guys here, and then another high pick on the way. Where do we go from here? I still think Cade Cunningham is more of a directional star than not, even if you just don't know what to do with his ceiling at the moment. The Golden State Warriors, another, I think, fairly easy one. I don't know where else you would go other than Jonathan Kuminga with this. He still has this level of inconsistency to me where it feels like he can do everything in drips and drabs, but then he fades into the background and you don't hear a lot of him. But I do think he's come a long way offensively. He can put the ball on the floor. He's tested out some step backs, some pull-ups, shooting 22 of 35 on floaters this year. That's going to be a nice counter for him. Will he ever be more efficient on the more difficult looks, or is this someone who's going to thrive mostly as more of a play finisher? And then what is he going to do as a playmaker? I've yet to really see that part of his game unlocked, which is why, I mean, the other part of it is just Andrew Wiggins has been so bad, but there's been just an inconsistent deployment until the later half of the year. And even then, just not in high volume of, well, can you play him with Andrew Wiggins together, or is that just untenable? He's only passing on 28.5% of his drives. And when you're shooting over 50% on those looks, that's fine. That's still the second. He also has the second lowest assist rate on drives among 87 players who have used as many as him. Jaren Jackson Jr. is number one. And so I'm not saying he needs to turn into an offensive hub, but this is someone who you kind of can see when the defensive discipline locks in and when he's trying harder on the defensive glass, you see the skeleton of what's just, I wouldn't go as far as, I know some people think he could be a star, but just an excellent player at the NBA level. And the Warriors just need to further plumb that moving forward while also juggling the fact that, oh, Steph Curry's, 36, 35 years old, and we still need to win immediately around him. And this team needs him to go supernova every night still, the way it's built. I don't know if Kuminga is going to be ready to that degree to be the second or third or fourth best, even fourth best player on a title contender. But given how this season started, given the rumors that came out, it was kind of well before the trade deadline that he was unhappy. I think if you're a Warriors fan, you have to be, I wouldn't say ecstatic, but at least somewhat comfortable with how his season has gone, because it did seem like it was going to be borderline disastrous for a minute. The Houston Rockets, another easy one. Alperen Sengun, who still might win the award. I do think the ankle injury is probably going to hurt him in that regard. I also think there's been some just like weird talk about, oh, the Rockets better off without Alperen Sengun. Look at the rate at which they're winning since he's been injured. No, they've hit a very favorable part of their schedule. Let's see how they deal now that the competition picks back up. All the credit in the world to them. Don't get me wrong there, but this is not a situation where you're better off without Alperen Sengun. He has, I do think part of this is, okay, they finally started running the offense through him, giving him more of a role, but he can wreak havoc from anywhere on the floor as a passer. And you see these comparisons to Nikola Jokic and Domas Sabonis. He's not as nearly as flashy as Nikola Jokic. Like the IQ, like nobody is, to be fair. Domantas Sabonis feels like he has more of a physicality to him, but I think Sengun can probably jumpstart your offense in a larger variety of ways. Sengun has improved his defensive positioning around the rim. That's been a big deal for the Rockets. He refined his touch outside of the restricted area, still not taking threes, but as someone from that 4 to 16 foot range, he can be a little bit of a threat from there. I do think moving forward that you're probably going to need to see a further exploration of his 3-point shot. He's not hitting it, but you want to see that volume go up there so that you can continue creating space for some of your on-ball attackers. And I'm talking, Amen Thompson's done a great job working off the ball this season, but him moving forward, even Jalen Green, where I think that probably he's going through his usual end of the season hot stretch, but even Jalen Green, he's had to deal with so many different changes and then also just hasn't had the best spacing context, it feels like, in a lot of lineups around him. And if you're five and let's say he's playing with Jabari Smith, like having those two guys be able to shoot does open things up for Jalen Green's rim game, but that's just in general for the Rockets. So that might be something to monitor. But the way he's so methodical, but he's also very physical, has that kind of FU factor to him. And the passes that he's able to see from anywhere on the court are incredible. And I also like that we've seen kind of a more aggressive scoring mode from him this season, because that you want to balance that so that teams don't play you as sort of this over deferential non-scoring threat. And I think that hasn't been like the hugest issue with him in the past, but I think he's answered questions about, oh, well, he kind of score enough. And you look at his averages and it's, oh yeah, this dude's going to average 20 plus and 5. That's a pretty fucking big deal. On to the Indiana Pacers. It says a lot about how much Tyrese Halliburton was struggling lately that I thought about this pick for a minute. And I was like, do I just go with Aaron Nesmith? Like, look at what he's been able to do compared to last year. And I really appreciate the defensive body of work and I trust him to attack closeouts more. Let's not overcomplicate this by any stretch of the game. And it helps that Halliburton is playing better over his past couple of outings. Shout out to the Clippers drop defense on, what was that, Monday night. But this is someone who's already a star and is now a mega star and just brutalizes defenses from in every capacity imaginable. And like, that's the hardest leap to make, the one that he has made right now. And so if you wanted to vote for him as the most improved player overall, I don't know if he's been good enough since the hamstring injury, but that type of leap is absolutely one that can deserve recognition for it. And like, that's kind of wild to say, just when you consider how improved he was last year. Just like that was sort of we saw it a little bit in the lead up, or not the lead up, but that post trade to the Indiana Pacers. But then he just comes on last year and it's just like, oh, that's an all-star talent. And now it's, oh no, that this guy's an all NBA talent. Had he never gotten injured, maybe finishes in the top 5 of the MVP ballot. Yes, has his defensive issues, but I think we've even seen that he's more adaptable than your traditional offensive fulcrum. He was on the ball so much, and it took a while to kind of figure this out. But now without Buddy Hield there, now with Benedict Mathurin injured, and you're trying to incorporate Pascal Siakam, we've seen more of him kind of play off Siakam, and to just have that option in someone who is so good with the ball in his hands. That's incredible. And this is someone who I don't know where he's going to end up in the All NBA discussion because of the injury and then because of how he played for the most part after that. But I would argue that he's probably, I mean, he's a shoo-in for All NBA. I'll say that unless he misses more games. But I think that he's probably a second team lock at this point. And that's just, we were not saying that about Tyrese Halliburton 2 years ago, just flat out. So appreciate the degree of the degrees of progress that he has made just in such a short amount of time. Our next one is the Los Angeles Clippers. I would say no good options here. You can go shout out to Ivica Zubac for kind of shape shifting, offensively, depending on the lineup he's in. We've even seen it happen against the Pacers on Monday night. Like there will be matchup issues with him defensively. I suppose you could go with Terrence Mann, or if you really wanted to galaxy brain this and say, well, look at James Harden and the way he's kind of playing off the ball more. I just have to go. It's almost by default Amir Coffey. The fact that he's now carved out a role. I was in love with him leading into the 2022 offseason, I think is when he signed his contract, kind of fades like it felt like nothing last year. And now it's back this year. And when you just watch him play with the stars and then he's just sort of flying around on both ends of the floor, and to have that positional stability from a supporting cast member who I don't know how many minutes they'll rely on him come playoff time, but this is someone who has mattered to them right now, which I guess you look at what the Clippers are doing and kind of imploding in the moment. And you're, well, is that necessarily a good thing? That they're getting 20 minutes a game of just quality play from Amir Coffey, I think winds up being a big deal for their playoff rotation, especially if they ever want to get to downsizing lineups that do not include PJ Tucker when it's going to matter most there. So it was kind of an easy decision for me. There are probably a couple players worth honorable mentioning there, but it was just one of those teams with, I would argue, no exceptional options if you're looking for that just caps lock improvement factor there. The Los Angeles Lakers, kind of another team in the same boat. You could go with Austin Reeves. When you look at, he shoulders a lot of responsibility defensively, doesn't always pan out well. The stuff he needs to do off the ball offensively is kind of exhausting when you look at his movement. We've seen him set screens, and now he's taking more threes. That's like this is a guy who I do think he's improved, or at least validated his stock as this isn't, maybe he got the plays for the Lakers bump, but he is a very impactful, very good basketball player. I also went with D'Angelo Russell. He is, he's like the same player, but he's not. He's become one of the most dangerous off the dribble threats for most off the dribble 3-point threats for most of this season. And to have that sustain is a big deal. I think that he has done a better job of just with his patience and slowing it down as a passer when they actually need him to do that stuff. And to that end, he's winning the minutes he plays without Anthony Davis and LeBron James. And like when you're just the Lakers and you're propping up an offense in that degree without those two guys on the floor, you can get into some of the data that shows Anthony Davis, D'Angelo Russell, no LeBron is actually getting smacked, I believe, last time I checked. So there are concerns about that. Again, who did you want to else did you want to go with for the Lakers here though? I would argue there's maybe Rui. I just kind of understands himself as a player, and his 3-pointers are going down. He's at over 40% this season on over 3 attempts per game. If you wanted to go that route, fine, but there's really no one else has played enough. They have dealt with a ton of injuries, but it's not LeBron or AD. If it's not going to be Austin Reeves, it's not Spencer Dinwiddie, it's not Taurean Prince. Gabe Vincent has not played. It's not going to be Cam Reddish. The Lakers seem to be holding out hope for a minute that it was. Just a team with no exceptional options. The Memphis Grizzlies, another team where this was like kind of difficult, probably more difficult than it should have been. And then it was like, I was thinking to myself, no, you don't need to galaxy brain this. I thought about Santi Aldama. You can't really go with Gigi Jackson. That just doesn't make, you could look at what he's done over the course of the season and say, hey, look at how much he improved from where we thought he initially was. It's Desmond Bane. And let's not overthink this. I know he's dealt with his own injuries, but his ability to remain effective as the focal point without Ja is kind of undersold. Like every other candidate on the team anywhere is a come out of nowhere guy. Although I really did think about Santi Aldama, just he's shown more as a passer this year. Just look at this. More than half of Bane's made shots go unassisted. That's up from 40% last year, 30% as a sophomore, and 18% as a rookie. Like, this is someone who has increasingly needed to shoulder more of a self-creation burden. And you look at him and it's, well, yeah, you've seen some of the just like the Memphis Grizzlies are not going to have an elite offense when he has to be the primary driver of it all, but that's not really a super insult. You're going to average 24 points, 5 assists per game, and you're going to see your true shooting, okay, dip, but by fewer than 2 percentage points to where you're still at 58-7, which is I that's over league average, I believe. I haven't checked that actually in a couple of days, so maybe it's not. It's close enough, and you're still shooting 38% from three, 54% on twos. This is like this is a legit someone who could be an all-star candidate. I think it'll always be. Shouldn't say always. It's tough to envision it now when you look at kind of the pecking order of the West and how much the Grizzlies have faded from prominence because of injuries this year. But John Morant isn't John Morant. He is an all-star talent, to be fair. I'm not misspeaking on that. Desmond Bane's an all-star talent. Like, this is a dude that would I predict that he makes an all-star game in his career? I'm going to say yes. Just that level of self-creation there. Maybe it doesn't happen for the Grizzlies if they decide they need to get bigger on the wings or something, and he's, you know, collateral damage of them getting more expensive and still not having that player. But yeah, this dude is really good, and I think the combination of he's missed about he's going to end up missing like close to half the season this year, still not getting to the free throw line a ton, but just look at what he's shouldering and the talent that's around him, and so it's a huge deal. I'm sorry, 24-5 and 59 true shooting. So those are numbers that are like like they're comparable to last year, though he's only upped his scoring, his assists on a per possession basis a little bit. But like they were already a huge jumps. And to do that when you're on such a team that I would argue is just not built to put you in your optimal role. You're outside your comfort zone. And so all the respect and shout outs in the world to Desmond Bane this year. Next team is the Miami Heat. This one was pretty easy. It was Duncan Robinson, and I think I can boil it down to 3 words: live dribble passing. That is literally all. But we saw kind of the turn last year, especially in the playoffs. This is someone who is a legitimate inside the arc, not ultra dynamic, but threat now. And the Heat are getting him going downhill more, in part out of necessity, but they do have the bodies on some nights not to lean on him in that capacity. And yet they are. 4.6 drives per 36 minutes last year. That's up to 7 this year. That's a big freaking deal. And so I think he has been, just to kind of see his contract, like the story that got him the contract, and then it was probably valued as one of the net negatives in the league. To now you look at it and it's, well, did he make it worthwhile? You can look at some of the earlier portions of it and, say it's a net even now. You might look at that contract and just say Duncan Robinson under $20 million a year is a fucking steal. That is something that we could actually say right now, which is pretty incredible. And so, and we know it kind of holds up in the postseason because we saw more of this version of him last year in the playoffs as the Heat made their way to the final. So that's just, as much as part of the job is to critique and be inflammatory sometimes or passionate about, holding teams accountable or players accountable or singling out what went wrong. I love these types of stories. Like, those are just like, this entire exercise is fun to just talk about guys who have improved maybe not a bunch in every case, but just to talk about guys who are getting better. That's contrary to popular belief, a lot of us do not root for players to fail. Believe it or not. I know that might shock a few people. The Bucks, I feel like this might be a controversial pick and that a lot of people are going to want to go with Bobby Portis. He's been good. I just can't get there. Defensively, specifically, I do think he's probably broadened his offensive horizons a little bit more, and to where you look at like the Giannis and Brook big stuff. Is he kind of maybe a more dynamic guy after setting screens? If you wanted to partner him with just Damian Lillard, you could make that case. I really think it has to come down to AJ Green. Just shout out for, giving the business defensively this year, and he will throw his body in front of a runaway freight train if it means maybe taking a charge. Or I didn't pick him. I picked Malik Beasley. Like, this guy's on a minimum contract. The shooting comes back and it's in higher volume. The bigger deal for me, and well, not the bigger deal, but something that I think has impressed me, and it's probably flown under the radar, and I don't blame people for not caring about it because their defense has been all over the place. He's been like okay guarding up this season, whether it's like kind of on switches or just not defending a like-sized player in general. And to have that on a minimum contract from someone who, I don't think minimums imply that he was on the outskirts of the league. I don't think it was ever that. He even mentioned he had some bigger offers. He chose the roll over this. That's really cool. And it could end up being a big deal for Milwaukee in the postseason. It'll certainly be a big deal for Malik Beasley's next contract. the Bucks will not be the ones offering that, just because they're not going to have bird rights on him. And I would argue that he is. They're not even going to have when you look at they're going to be in danger of like not even having their mid level available to spend. And so he's going to price himself out of Milwaukee, and that's mostly going to be the shooting. But he has held his own against some of those larger defensive assignments. The Minnesota Timberwolves, there has to be a shout out to Naz Reid here, and I do think that he has improved as a perimeter defender. He's kind of really clamped up on his rim protection overall in certain lineups. You don't want him being the lone big, but if he's the second big, he's actually done as that second line of defense. I think he's done really good down low. It has to be Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and not just because I'm trying to curry favor with Grant, who, if he's smart, will never listen to this episode. This is someone who became a throw-in in all these different trades. Didn't even necessarily look like he would amount to much with Minnesota. Like, yeah, they re-signed him and he had some nice moments last year. Now they basically use him as like 4 different people on the offense. Like sometimes he's a point guard and sometimes he'll cut and sometimes he's a spot up shooter. Sometimes he needs to get into the lane, and he's cleaned up his shot diet and his decision making. He's hitting his threes. And when you really start to dig into the all defense stuff, he has a fringe case. I don't think he's going to make one of my 2 teams, but you look at his ability to pressure and stick with every ball handler, basically of all separate sizes. And then the contests he provides as the helper have been really good this year. I like, whoa, like he is someone who, and he's been, just to say that he's been their, of the non-Anthony Edwards division, their most reliable wing shooter. That is maybe an indictment more so on Jaden McDaniels, but he's kind of overshadowed how uneven or disappointing Jaden McDaniels' offense has been for much of this year. Grant will be happy about that one. You all can tell him that I picked Nickeil Alexander-Walker instead of going with my guy Naz Reid, solely because I respect Grant as a co-host in person, but also because I think it's the right choice. New Orleans Pelicans, I guess Trey Murphy's making a late push here, but I would go with Herb Jones. The defense, I think, has just gotten better when you're looking at how he defends sometimes from like the inside out or even just the outside in, and the way that manipulate entire offensive sets for opponents. We know what he can do on those closeouts and sort of fly out of nowhere, but this is someone who is basically impossible to screen or shake, and he will guard like 9 different actions on the same half court possession. Basically, the bigger improvement though has come on the offensive end, where he is. We will see if this holds up into the playoffs. Assuming that, I mean, it's not even assuming the Pelicans get there at this point. It looks like the Clippers might be a play-in team, and the Pelicans might just settle into a top 4 spot. Shooting 43.1% from 3 on over 4 attempts per game, about 4.2 attempts per 36 minutes. That's a big deal. Over 3 attempts per game. 4.2 is 3-point attempts for 36 minutes. Not a ton. I think you also need to give him credit, though, of what he's been able to do inside the arc. Almost 59% of his twos. Doesn't take a lot of shots there, but he's very quietly been and I don't know how much he's really up to this, because you look at the assist numbers and they're kind of similar, but this is not someone who's going to let the ball stick. Like, he will catch it. He will make the decision whether to shoot or drive. And that part of his game has gotten a lot better. And I think that he's kind of a more trustworthy finisher, not just as a scorer, but just decision maker on drives. And to have that be such a huge part of your game, in addition to being an all defense talent that improves your defensive capabilities, just absolutely wild. Can't say enough good things about Herb Jones, pretty much just like everyone else on through this exercise. So this one is a little bit difficult. I'm not going to lie. I went with Jalen Brunson, and you could go, I think the answer might just be Deuce McBride, but his role was so small, basically non-existent for much of the year, that to see what he's doing now, getting into the ball on defense, hitting threes of all shapes and sizes, even kind of, polishing off his role as just not a complicated passer, but as someone you can trust to get the ball moving, sometimes in traffic as well. But and you could also go look, Isaiah Hartenstein. He might get some all defense votes. I feel like he's doing a lot of the same stuff he's always done. Maybe not so much as a passer. The Knicks don't use him that way, but just in larger doses. That's a form of improvement. And so I'm looking at, if you want to go with Dante DiVincenzo, all of a sudden turned into just like, Steph Curry's understudy. The level of 3-point shooting he's providing is going to be, if that holds into the playoffs, the Knicks, like that is mission critical to what they're doing. And we'll see if they ever get to full strength. Mitchell Robinson might have seemed like he had a case before the injury way back when. This is another instance where I was thinking, all right, don't overcomplicate this. Jalen Brunson, there's more that you want from him, particularly as a passer, maybe in traffic. But when you look, especially from the start of the season with the way that defenses are still guarding him and his ability to adjust to that, to still be an efficient scorer. Not just overall, but inside the arc where he's facing a ton of pressure. That's not easy to do. Like, he's working within very narrow confines a lot of the time, and his job has only gotten harder since the Julius Randle injury. And you've seen his efficiency kind of slump off a little bit as a result. Still at 51% from two. He's at over 40% from three again for the third time in 4 seasons, which just proves that, okay, this isn't this isn't an aberration. He's making those threes though while taking just a ton of pull-up jumpers from beyond the arc. And like, this is not someone who, yeah, okay, he would take those shots in Dallas a little bit, and you were probably okay with him taking them last year as a member of the Knicks. I don't think you ever looked at him at any point in his career. And maybe I'm just misremembering swaths of last season. Looked at him and said, oh, this is going to be one of the most dangerous self-created three-point shooters in the NBA. And yes, the numbers have pulled back from that. I think he's now dipped below 37% on pull-up three-pointers for the year. I don't know that I care. When you look at the load he's carrying, he was working through an injury himself, and he ranks in the top, I think it's about 10 at this point. Yeah, he's 10th. It might be 11th in made pull-up three-pointers at 99. So as I'm recording this, Donovan Mitchell, Anthony Edwards, Fred VanVleet, James Harden, Hallie, Trae Young, Jason Tatum, Damian Lillard, Steph, and Luka are the only players in front of him. And so you kind of look at that and say, wow, he's made more pull-up threes than Tyrese Maxey, than De'Aaron Fox, than Devin Booker. He's played more games than a lot of these guys, but not by much. It's like, I mean, making more pull-up threes than a Paul George, basically a similar number of games, speaks to the discrepancy and context of their roles. I want to make that clear, but this is, I wouldn't call him necessarily an every level scorer, but he impacts the offense in a way that makes it flow better at every single level you're looking at, even if you don't value him as an A+ passer. And to have that type of I'll call it a jump, to have that type of an improvement when you're already coming off a year where you were involved in the All-NBA discussion, that's not easy to do. It's not on the same scale as what we're talking about with Tyrese Halliburton, but it's sort of the same genre of leap where this was already an all-star type of guy, fringe All-NBA type of guy, and he's still managing to get better. And that needs to be celebrated. And he's just going to get the anecdotal bump for me too, because you look at this and Julius Randle's missing a ton of time. The Knicks' spacing still is not, yeah, there are lineups and you have Dante DiVincenzo, but it's not like super pristine. Defenses don't treat them like it's super pristine either, even though they do hit their threes. You can quibble over whether they need to take more. So they're not a bad three-point shooting team, but they're not the spaciest offense is what I would say. And Jalen Brunson's ability to thrive within that, I won't say it's beyond compare. That would be hyperbole, but it's huge. The Oklahoma City Thunder, this is pretty easy. Jalen Williams, Jalen Williams, excuse me. I normally don't consider second-year players for most improved player. He is there. His defense is better. I think him and Lou Dort, and there's the element of Chet Holmgren being behind everyone, but those two guys, having them up top, is what makes Shea so good at being able to pinpoint when he can go and get steals. It's also insulated some of his defensive assignments. I am more impressed with the offense where he can run certain units as kind of like, all right, maybe Chet needs to be on the floor, but like Shea doesn't need to be there. And he's probably better off without being untethered to Josh Giddey right now. The counters he has on offense, the step back jumper, the pull up jumper, he's like, just basically when you dig into the numbers, it depends on how you really want to filter it. But he's just the most efficient pull up jump shooter in the NBA right now. And he is, as I'm recording this, at 55.8 effective field goal percentage on pull up jumpers while taking over 300 of them. If you're looking at everyone who's taken over 300 pull up jumpers, the only player with a higher effective field goal percentage is CJ McCollum. And shout out CJ. Maybe CJ should have been a consideration for the Pelicans. He's been a little bit better defensively, got the 3-point volume up there. That feels like a bridge too far, but my guy has helped provide them floor balance there. I don't know why I called him my guy. I never met him. I apologize for using that phrasing. But J-Dub, when you look at kind of his ceiling, and it's the other thing, sorry, skipping over this, there's more. I've been said this a lot with the Thunder, and it was why I liked that they got Gordon Hayward, that I wanted someone with more jiggle and joggle to their ball handling in the half court. And Jalen Williams is just, it's hidden beneath the explosion sometimes, but there's a lot of directionality to the way that he can play. He has counters, he has spins and fades. I already mentioned the step backs from the perimeter. I don't know that we can put a ceiling on this player. And he has gone from someone who's just like, oh, kind of pushed Paolo to, there was a discussion about rookie of the year to, would you rather have him over than Paolo long term? Or even more broadly, not to make this at Paolo's expense, how many All NBA teams is Jalen Williams going to make in his career? And if the answer is fewer than one, that might seem spicier than if you're going to go with like 2 or 3, or if he becomes a perennial contender at that rate. Speaking of Paolo Banchero, we move on to the Orlando Magic, where I did not pick Paolo Banchero because I picked Jalen Suggs. Holy crap. This guy, so what was interesting was I had listened after we did our all defense stuff and thought that I needed to adjust my priors because I didn't hear, and I read a lot of like the mock all defense discussions. They seem to be coming out around that time. It was interesting. He didn't make, like, there were times where he was just left off altogether. And I don't want to frame it because defense is so hard to quantify and understand. And I will always operate under the assumption that I have done something wrong. That's the type of person that I am. But I was like kind of surprised at how it felt like he was being glossed over. And the difficulty on the assignments is there. The way he's able to just bust up possessions, even as a shot blocker at points, it's there. The defensive playmaking in general is there. The pick sixes, those are there. And it just goes beyond counting stats. And I'm surprised he actually hasn't gotten more love in the most improved player discussion. Probably take a little while for his offense to take off. The shooting is good, but he's really, they have him playing the de facto point guard role now. His full floor passing has gotten a lot better. He will keep the ball moving. I don't know if he's still not someone that you're going to trust to slow it down, run a ton of pick and rolls and facilitate the offense from that regard. It's also not outside the realm of possibility. We were talking about him as a supercharged like Derek White at one point, where it's just like you might be able to, it feels like he'll leave his imprint a little bit more than White, who's an exceptional player and had an all-star case this year. But he is going to be like kind of fill the gaps, and like Jalen Suggs might be in your face. And the fact that he's just younger, I think there's some stuff to plumb with him as a passer, and maybe even just as a scorer outside of his driving, that could hit. And then you look back and say, oh, why did people pass judgment on him after his first year, 2 years in the career, 2 years of his career too quickly? He showed signs of this last year, but like he's really put it together this season, and it's made the Magic much more dangerous, not just in the context of fighting for a playoff spot in the Eastern Conference, but what they could actually do should they get to the playoffs when you're looking at all these other teams who are just so banged up. The 76ers, an easy choice. Tyrese Maxey, the counting stats are just gaga. I think he still is among, I have not checked the betting favorites to win most improved player. I wouldn't be like, why would I ever be mad? I don't get mad about this stuff normally, but 26 points, 6 assists, up from 20 points and 3.5 assists last year. I think when you look at that, it's, oh my God. And there's been a real volume uptick there. Yes, he's under 50% from 2, under 38% from 3. The volume and difficulty just getting jacked up, especially in the absence of Joel Embiid. The other thing, though, is that the stretch without Joel Embiid, how poorly the Sixers have played in general, I think that's shown the limitations of his game and kind of how he can be a little bit more of a reactive passer. I'm curious to see whether he could develop into more of a methodical playmaker, because I think you can see like he's done a good job shifting the cadence, the speed, the rhythms of his game, but there's still sort of I don't know who I'd liken it to, but like if you look at Devin Booker, if you look at DeMar DeRozan, like the way that, or Devin Booker specifically, because he shoots threes, the way he's able to leverage the threat of his 3-point shot into doing things inside the arc, that slowed down element of his game doesn't feel like it's there yet. That's okay. He's wrapping up year 3, and he could win most improved player. And I'm not going to provide much pushback. The Sixers have an all NBA caliber talent on their roster, which is just, you talk about mining value out of the draft to get him with a number 21 pick in 2020. That's going to go down as one of the best draft picks in recent memory. We are on to the Phoenix Suns. This kind of, so I went into this as a cynic and said, I might just pick Devin Booker. I still feel like I've seen enough from him as a passer to make that case. And there's just no one else that I'm going to throw here. Like, yeah, some of the Yusuf Nurkic stuff on defense has been cute and quaint, and we'll see how it holds up in the playoffs. The answer is actually Grayson Allen, who is just, aside from leading the league in 3-point percentage, has been, well, I mean, that's a bit, by the way, that's just a really big part of this when you're looking at his case. So I don't want to dismiss that. There's the 3-point percentage. He's doing some things inside the arc. I've actually been really impressed with what he's been able to do for stretches on defense, where he's going to come and go stride for stride with a player and then contest their shot, or even coming over as the helper. Like, he's had some really just good moments, like contesting shots on the move. And that just reinforces how much the Suns need him, which is an incredibly uncomfortable place to be, I guess. when you're a team that's told us who you are for, just 70 plus games so far this season. But he's not like he's a feel good story of the year for them. And that's someone that you're going to want to keep long term, not just to roll over the salary slot, but because I don't necessarily know where this team would be without him. That's kind of again, a scary proposition to think about, but also just a very big testament to how well he's played this year. We are on to the Portland Trailblazers. I thought about like the Shaedon Sharpe, when you look at the counting stats and his ability, I mentioned this on the previous podcast, to kind of show that there's not going to be a ton of overlap with him and some of the other core guys that you care about most. I just couldn't get there because the functionality of the game is there, but there was a lot of just trying stuff from him. He hasn't perfected that yet. There's also the injury stuff, so that limits his sample size. You're still going to want to see a little bit more from him on defensively. Can he guard up? And he has the physical tools to be someone who's going to be more disruptive on that end than he's been when he's healthy. I went with Anthony Simons, and I don't think this is going to be a popular pick. I thought about Matisse Thybulle for a minute, done a little bit better where you can kind of trust him to put the ball on the floor and keep it moving. When I go and watch Anthony Simons, I think there needs to be credit given to, okay, what he does on offense as a scorer, it largely is just sustained like all these different iterations of the team over the past 3 years, including the 8 different iterations that the Blazers have had this season. 38.5% from 3 on nearly 9 attempts per game. And he's averaging 5.5 assists, which is a monster increase over last year. And he is not someone who is you want spearheading your entire offense as a playmaker. He is throwing passes he would have not seen 2 years ago. And so to be there, and he's still turning the ball over it's like 12% of the time on 28 usage. Like, this is someone who is 24. I don't know where he fits into the larger context of the Blazers. There's a lot to kind of be desired when you're looking at him as a multi-level scorer. Is it someone that's going to, can he make the adjustment or get to a point where he's getting to the basket more so that he can up his free throws? But like, even his finishing has been on the climb over the past 2 seasons, including this one. And like, he has some in-between stuff. He's shooting 48% between 10 and 16 feet. So, and do you want him? You look at, he's cleaned up over the past like 2 seasons that always felt like, oh, it's like 1 or 2 or 3 too many long twos. That stuff's kind of been eradicated out. I think the bigger thing is like, oh, can he get to the basket more? Can he draw contact more on his play so that he can slow the game down in that capacity? He's just really good. And I think that how many times am I going to say that these players are just really good? Of course they're really good. That's why they're here for the most part. If he can get to a point where he's making these contributions on a good team, and when you look at what he can do as someone who doesn't need the ball in his hands, that's not far outside the realm of possibility. The defense makes it tough. The size makes it tough when he's not your point guard and he's 6'3". There are challenges there, and those are ones that the Blazers need to factor in and consider. I don't think that changes just the fact that he is a much better player, even if only view it as, well, what he's able to do sustains across less talented teams that provide him with a finite or a more finite margin for error would be the best way for me to describe it there. We're on to the Sacramento Kings. I went with Keegan Murray here. I think you could go with Keon Ellis. Again, that's enough. I think you could also make a case for Malik Monk if you really wanted to. But I think that's just another case of working off such a low baseline with Keon Ellis. Keegan Murray, one of the bright spots as a rookie last year, one of the best 3-point shooters or most dangerous 3-point shooters in the league this year. Now, you dig into his percentages, he's under 36% from 3 this year. There could be a lot going into that. The defense, though, and part of this, I wonder if it impacts him on the offensive end. Does he just not have the same level of lift because of the responsibility he's shouldering on defense? Keegan Murray ranks in the top 30 of total shots contested at the rim this year. Opponents are shooting under 60% against him there. That is good. They're shooting 4.3 percentage points worse against him inside 6 feet overall. That's another quality mark. Last year, he guarded one of the 2 highest usage players on 27.9% of his possessions. That number is up to 50.1% this season. That's almost double. That data came from basketball, B-ball index, excuse me. The assignments he's covering on the perimeter, the stuff he's kind of able to do still around the basket, because he does have like that bigger body, and you're going to need your wing or your 4 to do that type of stuff when Sabonis is your primary big. We need to see some of the offensive stuff normalized, but the defensive responsibility he is shouldering right now, it opens up all these different doors as to what he could be long-term. And when you get into why, they wouldn't give him up for Pascal Siakam or OG Anunoby, I'm with them. I mean, I didn't like the Siakam fit. That's why I'm with them there. And then also, it's clear that OG kind of wanted to be in New York, or at least didn't want to be in Sacramento. And so you can see it in what he's doing defensively. And if he gets to a point where he can give you not even more self-created stuff on the offensive end, though we've seen flickers and flashes of that a little bit, but if he's just going to get to a point where, okay, this is now a 39% three-point shooter flying around off movement and can do some stuff on the ball, in addition to what he's providing you defensively, where I wouldn't call it all defense stuff, but that's a rock solid positional defender to where let's build out your starting five as the Kings. And now all of a sudden you're saying, well, Keegan needs to be your second best defender. That's a really great spot to be. And there have just been, I think you could argue, two long stretches where he is their most valuable defender. And that in a lot of lineups, and there are limitations there, but it's easy, or it's expected to improve as a sophomore, from a rookie to a sophomore. He has gone above and beyond on the defensive side of things. We are on to the San Antonio Spurs. I thought about Blake Wesley here, but I went with Devin Vassell anyway. I just value that someone who's going to play more minutes. The defense can still sort of be touch and go, and you want him to be better. This is now officially someone who is on the 3-level scoring track, and it can come whether he's cutting, whether he has the ball in his hands, whether he's pulling up from mid-range, whether he's hitting self-created threes, whether he's hitting assisted threes, whether he's out in transition. And so it's like, you say it's a 3-level score. It's just an every capacity score at this point. And the door is still open for him to be the second best player on this team moving forward if they're going to be a contender. But the way that his game just fits seamlessly into what feels like any given lineup, you could bump him down to the number 3 and you're not going to feel his impact any less. I do think he deserves a lot of credit for his movement and being able to find space in the half court when the Spurs aren't fielding like the cleanest of spacing units. And like Victor Wembanyama at the 5 and the way he's been shooting threes like cleans up a lot of that. But even when you look in some of the more cramped lineups, to see what he is doing there, like this is just someone who has a nose for making an impact on the offensive end. If I thought, I would be prepared to give out like some more Devin Booker comps if I thought that he would have that type of passing leap in him. I don't know if he'll ever get the opportunity in San Antonio, and I haven't seen enough of it. That's kind of feels like more of a tertiary guy in that role. If you're still feeling, or if you were ever unsettled about his extension, why? I don't know why, but you should be feeling pretty good about what they paid him, because that's going to age like a fine wine, regardless, again, of where he fits into their offensive hierarchy. We are on to the Toronto Raptors. This was easy. It was Scotty Barnes. He would have been my most improved player pick. It doesn't look like he's going to meet the requirements though this season. Everyone's kind of focused on, okay, the shooting and the overall, the passing. Those are real things. I think the two things that have impressed me most about him is the interior passing specifically, and whether he's able to pass it right away off the catch, or when he's maintaining his dribble and just finding passes in traffic near the basket that he wouldn't have seen or been able to throw at any point before in his career. And then you look at what he's done defensively, and I know Darko Rajakovic has kind of changed positionally what he's guarding. It's like lit a fire under what he's able to do as a closeout defender. They're more disciplined, but they're more aggressive at the same time. He's able to stick through these guys. He's making better reads when it comes to screens. This is someone who I think, because of him improving, the one I think comes closest when you're looking at, did they improve in literally every facet of the game? Jalen Johnson comes closest, I think, to meeting that criteria in the league. Maybe Şengün, just like because the defensive element there, like how I think that Scotty Barnes improved. That's not something that someone else has. Maybe J-Dub, but I don't know if it's been that demonstrative on the defensive end. So he is my in my heart, he is my most improved player this season. It completely just changes what the Raptors can be moving forward, to know that they have their North Star, but also know that they're kind of short on wings now, which, did you ever think we were going to say that about the Raptors? I would love for him to at least be eligible so that we could have the discussion about him, but I get it. He had a great year anyway, and I think the Raptors are still kind of open-ended with their direction, but the stuff that he has done, he's the type of player that I think can keep their outlook afloat on the brighter end of the spectrum. On to the Utah Jazz. I thought about going Jordan Clarkson here just because I was impressed for most of the season with his passing. I think it could be, if you wanted to make a case for Larry Markkinen, it could be him. It has to be Colin Sexton. The pressure, this is someone we kind of always knew that he was underappreciated. He averaged like 24 points per game while shooting over 50% on twos and 39 or 37% from three a few years ago with the Cavs, and just no one was talking about it. And there are going to be restrictions and strictures in which you have to work if he's running the whole show for you. Not the type of slow it down creator that I've referenced now a couple of times, but in terms of getting downhill and putting defenses in rotation, whether it's from off the catch or from sort of this, slower dribble or even just a complete stop, he's able to do that. He still lights out 3-point shooter. He's done a pretty good job of hitting his pull-up triples this season, and that's always been kind of just the question about his game is, can he hit those? It's not just catch and shoots, but even just methodically dribble into them. The answer this season has been yes. He's at 34.5% on off the dribble threes. Not a super high number. It's good enough. It's good enough. And so to make that improvement, also I think he's been a better passer when he's getting moving downhill. That is the play for Utah. And they've also been, they shuffled some of their deck this year. And so there are a lot of guys where it's Walker Kessler, still one of the most valuable rim protectors alive. But when you're kind of looking at players with a track record, I really think if you wanted to go with Lowry, just because, well, look at how good he still is, even though the Jazz have turned over their roster and things aren't as easy on him. Clarkson, like I said, he really has over the past couple seasons made a jump as a passer. That's kind of it, though. Just like, I guess if he wanted to go Chris Dunn, but we've seen a lot of the stuff he was doing this stuff defensively all along. It's now he's kind of able to stay on the court. And yes, he's hit some threes at a higher clip that helps. I just think that Sexton has improved in more, expansive and meaningful ways. Finally, and not leastly, unless maybe you're looking at the standings, we go to the Washington Wizards. I don't actually know that there is another candidate here aside from Deni Avdija. I'll be curious to see. I haven't actually checked his eligibility. I know he did come back from that was it a right knee? It was a knee injury, and he's playing again. So that's good. I'm curious where he's going to end up on the games played spectrum. I'll double check that very quickly. Oh, he's at 65 as I record this. I'm curious to see where he's going to finish on my most improved player ballot. Now, that thing might be 25 players long. 55% on twos, 39% on threes. Still does not take enough of them. That's fine. The passing, I can't remember if I was talking to Matt Moderno about this or if it was way back when Quentin Mayo when we were talking about the Wizards. And I just said he has that fuck you factor to the way that when he gets into the lane where he can bounce dudes off his shoulders if he really wants to. He's really wanted to this year. And there's been stages to his season where we saw his role kind of gradually increase. He's trying out different counters when he gets into the lane, getting to the basket more overall. He's a little bit quicker with the ball in his hands from that stop position than you would think. 6.6 drives per 36 minutes last year, shot about 57% on them, 9.5 persist percentage, 10 drives per 36 minutes this year, still shooting 56.5% on them. And he's upped his assist percentage to 10. This list, it's cherry picked, but I just want to make it clear that this is how much he's improved and how effective he can be in the lane. Here's everyone who has used at least 500 drives that is scoring and assisting on them as often as Deni Avdija. Cole Anthony, Austin Reeves, Colin Sexton, making my case for the Jazz before me, Donovan Mitchell, and Luka Doncic. That's fucking it. And this is all, none of which is to say, this is someone who carries real responsibility on the defensive end when you look at the breadth of his assignments. I don't know if he's been as good on that end as in years past, but when he's taking on this extra offensive burden, if you're going to say, well, he's still a solid defender and can kind of I wouldn't say 1 through 4, but 2 through 4 is fine for him. And he can get after some ones. And now I'm looking at the Wizards, and there are just a lot of questions here. And we all know that I'm smitten with Jules Bernard at this point. But you're looking at the Wizards for real when you're trying to identify core players moving forward. And it's, we know Kyle Kuzma, Jordan Poole, even Tyus Jones, if he comes back, they're not for long. I don't know where Corey Kispert fits in the grand scheme of things. He's more valuable offensively than I think a lot of people give him credit for. But just looking at core players that might impact how you build out your team, the Wizards, I think, now have 2. Where I don't know if any of them are the best guy as part of a rebuild, and I would probably bet against either of them being the best guy. You need a high draft pick this year to pair with Bilal Coulibaly and Deni Avdija. It's a pretty good spot to be. And shout out to Deni Avdija, who, if this had gone on for longer this season, I'll be very curious to see where he finishes on my own most improved player ballot, but also the most improved player ballot in general, and then as well as yours, which, to close this out, we're going to be sending out. I don't think we're going to do it for all NBA. We'll do it for just the awards where we want to know who you would pick. And then we'll have our listener audience picks for every award. I will send out a sheet probably at some time at the beginning of April. We don't want to lock it in too soon. So if you want to be a part of that, join our Discord. The link to that's in the podcast and YouTube description. Follow us on all the socials if you've not done so already. If you've done all those things, recommend us, friends, family members, acquaintances, randos on the street, coworkers, enemies, even people on social media. We've gotten a lot of shout outs on Twitter lately. I really do appreciate you all helping us promote the show in any way that we can. So please continue doing that. Comment with thoughts. I'm not always going to respond to them, but it doesn't have to be, oh, just great job. But please, I love that. Stroke my ego. But this exercise, give me I want to know your most improved player, or someone that you disagree with and why, or that I glossed over. Until next time, though, and as always, I leave you with the shout out to the one, the only, the indelible, the real most improved player in our hearts and minds and our souls and our entire every fiber of our bodies, Frank Ntilikina.